So it's Jehangir Malik, OBE, is a civil society social impact leader and strategic advisor with 30 plus years of experience, leading a range of civil society organizations across the UK, USA, and South Asia. Is the non-executive director of ACH, director of MTS Initiative, amplifying the role of minority-led organizations in strengthening civil society. Recent roles include strategic advisor to UNICEF South Asia, that's on philanthropy and supporting diaspora engagement in the region. VCSEP director at the British Red Cross, and that was during the COVID-19 crisis, and leading organizations like Muslim Aid and Islamic Relief UK, focusing on mobilizing faith-based humanitarian responses across 30 countries. Jehangir held various board and commissioner positions, including the consort for the mayor of Solihull, Cardiff Integration of Refugees at the Wolf Institute, DCMS, Cost of Living Crisis Community Fund, West Midlands Combined Authority Strategic Partnership Group, WMCA Inclusive Communities Fund, National Emergencies Trust, and Birmingham Children's Commission. MashaAllah, there's quite a lot of things. I don't know how he has time to breathe, MashaAllah, but it's quite impressive. He was awarded an OBE in 2010 for his 20 years of humanitarian work. So inshallah, without further ado, we're going to go into some questions about a bit of history. There'll be Muslim civil service and society within the UK, and then some international questions as well, inshallah. That's the focus for tonight. So inshallah, any questions you want to ask, please put them in the chat. We'll have times as well where if anyone's got a question, we'll try and make it an interactive section. So please put your hand up, and Brother Jehangir will in his own time, when he feels it's the time, he will inshallah answer the questions as we go along. But I have some questions to get us started as well, inshallah, to continue all the way through. So I wanted to start with one that we were discussing earlier. That was, how do you feel about Muslim civil society, just as a whole in general? You know, what it's about, what it's kind of achieving, how the space is running, like from your breadth of experience, inshallah.
Okay, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Thank you very much, everybody, and for taking the time out to sit and have this conversation and discussion. So a little bit background. Started in 1992 during the Bosnia sort of war conflict in Birmingham as a student activist. 91, 92. I mean, that's probably older than most of you in this room. I'm guessing, with the exception of one or two people. But anyway, Bosnia conflict 92, 95, and got sort of into humanitarian response and mobilizing community organization, the community response to fundraising and needs at that particular time. With the blessings of the founder of Islamic Relief, Dr. Hani al-Banna, who was our ustad, our teacher, and our sort of the leader of Islamic Relief. And one of his main things was to sort of engage young people at that time to channel their activism, as it were, to something positive. And, you know, just like the current crisis, there is a feeling of helplessness and hopelessness. I hope not, but anyway, there is a feeling of helplessness, and what you try to do whatever you can to help this, you know, improve the situation. The Bosnian refugees were coming into the country. We were trying our level best to help and support and all the rest of it. And that was a 3-year war genocide. Actually, inshallah, God willing, I'm going to the 30th year memorial in Bosnia, in Srebrenica, on July the 9th, July the 10th and the 11th, which is really quite momentous in the sense that it's 30 years since that conflict started, 30 years since that genocide was at play, and 30 years since that really moved me into a place of humanitarian action and got into this line of work in that space. So subhanallah, I've been blessed to work in UK, in United States, in South Asia, and Pakistan, in places like Afghanistan and Kashmir, in different contexts and different environments. So I've been really very, very blessed and fortunate that I've been able to have a life of service and be involved in different sort of civil society contexts, UK, United States, South Asia, Pakistan, Afghanistan. And I've been very fortunate and blessed to be in about 35 missions around the world in all the war zones and conflict zones and all the rest of it, supporting our humanitarian effort at that particular time. So just more recently, in 2017, I was heading up Muslim Aid at the time. And Afnan, I'm going to come back to your question, but I just wanted to sort of share a little bit of background, as it were, and what some of this journey looked like. So I think the first big milestone was, 93, 94, Dr. Hani al-Banna, God bless him, said to me and my wife and my colleague helped set up Islamic Leaf USA. So we were fortunate enough to do that. The legal background, so we were setting up the legal structures and all the rest of it. In 93, 94, I went on what was a 6 months assignment that ended up being 7 years. So I lived in Los Angeles, California, setting up some Islamic Leaf, mobilizing community and setting up the structures and everything else. And that was beautiful. And then I was 9/11 happened. And then there was a humanitarian crisis in Afghanistan at that particular time after the war on terror, where Afghanistan felt the brunt of it again. And I was then sent to lead a deputy mission in Afghanistan. So I was based in Kabul after 9/11. It was a very precarious time with very dangerous, I would say, set of circumstances. But anyway, I was based in Kabul and we were working throughout that situation and trying to provide humanitarian system, building civil society. And I was fortunate enough to work with many different Afghans and community organizations at that particular time. Then came back to the UK and I was the UK director until then, alhamdulillah, UK director, 2000, and we had 25th anniversary and lots of challenges and lots of difficulties. And I left in 2015, 2014, Gaza war happened and Israel designated Islamic Leaf as a terrorist organization, as did other entities in the Middle East. And so we had to deal with constant accusations and challenges of funding. And I mean, one consistent theme that I've been involved in for quite some time of my life is being accused of being a terrorist throughout my working life post 9/11. When I mean accused, meaning directly and indirectly, a suspicion, or media interviews, journalists. When you're ever working in war-torn conflicts and territories, we were always asked these questions: which side are you on, and this and the other questions that others wouldn't normally get asked. But anyway, that's been part and parcel of the humanitarian aid workers' journey. Then I left in 2015, and then 2017, I took on the role of CEO of Muslim Aid, where it went into administration and governance challenges and the likes. And so, alhamdulillah, we led on a strategic process in strengthening the governance strategy and organizational compliance and got it out of Charity Commission's interim administration. We can talk about that. It's just quite a laborious exercise, but if your governance is poor, then Charity Commission will step in and take over in its administration, depending on what level of governance is at. So I had to deal with all of that at a leadership level. Then 2017 was a bit of a pivotal moment in which, if you cast your minds back, Grenfell happened, the tragedy of Grenfell, which is now 8 years. And we at Muslim Aid were mobilizing and responding and so forth. And then that sort of made me realize that the level of civil society response, and two initiatives came out of that. The National Emergency Trust, which we found, which was helped being a part of founding, which was about responding to crisis at that particular time, and the Emergency Partnership Coordination Body, all based out of British Red Cross, and I was the program director for that in 2019, 2020. So I was responsible. We were part of a team that was responsible for distributing about £100 million during COVID, managing the coordination between the voluntary sector. And then I stepped down for a bit when I realized that the structural inequality in the system, which worked against the people who are most impacted, largely from minority backgrounds. So then we set up something called Muslim Civil Society and helping organizations build their organizational capacity, dealt with strategy, governance, and funding, which we can elaborate on a little bit more. And then a couple of weeks, 2-3 weeks ago, I just took on the role of interim exec director for Refugee Coalition called Together with the Refugees Asylum Reform Initiative, to try and push the government and policymakers for a fairer deal and a more humane and just system for asylum seekers and refugee, upholding the Geneva Convention, so forth. So that's a little bit of background as to what I've been doing for the last sort of time period, but it's interfacing faith, civil society, humanitarian, and work within the UK. And to answer your sorry, before I answer the question, I'm not looking at any chat groups or anything like that. So, Afnan, if there are any questions or anything of that nature, please interject and ask away. No problem at all. So I just thought I'd do your whistle-stop tour of some of the work that been involved in over the last 3 decades.
Absolutely. That sounds really influential. A big mix of international and local initiatives there, all one after another. Mashallah. Yeah, no, of course. If anyone has a question and they raise their hand, I'll make it known to yourself, and anything that anyone's put in the messages. So inshallah, when we have the right time, I can address it to you.
Great. So yeah, I'm watching, probably like many of you, with enthusiasm with what's happening in New York. It's good to, with the mayor of New York at the moment, and being elected, and sort of strong ticket and all the rest of it. So it's it's heartening to see sort of positive changes taking place even in a moment of great darkness. So it's heartwarming to see that. So coming back to it, coming back to sort of so being kind of currently focused on the evolution of Muslim society. Okay, so I have a slide deck on this, Afnan. Maybe if at some point where there's an opportunity to have a bit more face-to-face opportunity, I have a bit of a 50-year slide deck on the Muslim civil society. It's been a bit of a presentation thing of mine. Is that Muslim community arrived in the 60s? What did it look like back then? Then what happened in the 70s? What happened in the 80s and 90s? And all backed up with socioeconomic demographic data of what that looks like, and what the changes have looked like from a population size, what does the distribution look like, and why is that important? Is that we've grown as a Muslim community from 2001 from 1.65 million to almost 3.8 million. Okay, so more than doubled in size. Any really good maths people around the table would know what the percentages are increase on that. So when you've gone from a population size of 1.65, which I think was just under 3%, to 3.85 million, to just under 6%, that's a significant increase. But if you look at Muslim civil society, as in the civil society infrastructure, organizations, what you might call traditionally community infrastructure, it hasn't grown in line with the population size. So what do we mean by Muslim civil society? I mean, what does this word mean? Well, the old word that you might be familiar with, I said the old word, but the previously used terminology was Muslim charities. If I say to you Muslim charities, what comes to mind, Afnan?
Charities, I just remember the massive Ramadan drives they would do. They would just send you letters, emails, and any possible way to fundraising.
If I said Muslim charity, what kind of organizations come to your head?
Oh, okay. So organizations, obviously Islamic Relief. You mentioned Dr. Hani, and we've met him a few times. Huge influence. Like Islamic Relief comes to mind immediately because they've worked hard to make it that way. That's what would come to mind. And then just loads of other charities, mostly international efforts, I think, would come to mind, especially for Muslims. There's still this huge idea of like back home is back home, and that's back home over there, and
that's right.
should always go. I think there's still a lot of that within it as well, and it's kind of the old school sort of organizations as well, very classical sort of ways to deal with people, and it's all about connections and just the elders knowing one, for example, or knowing one in the village back home. This kind of idea would really spring to mind for me.
So when I say Muslim charity, you'll think of international organizations and a plethora of them, with Islamic League being at the forefront and everybody else that's along the side of that, number one. But largely international development organizations will probably, when I say Muslim charities, then the second thing that probably might come to mind is mosques. And the third thing that might come to mind is Islamic schools, right? And then you might come across a few social welfare organizations, such as, of course, National Zakat Foundation over the last decade, and then localized organizations at a very localized level, okay? So the top tier would be the most well-resourced, most well-functioning, you might say, is the international development organizations responding to humanitarian crises, number one. Number two, masajids and Islamic centers, and if you're in Manchester, British Muslim Heritage Centre types, big community anchor organizations that are dotted throughout the country. And then thirdly, Islamic schools, and then fourthly, a few national organizations, MCB types and others, right? So it's quite limited. And other than financial terms, other than the international development organizations and mosques, you might say, in cash liquidity terms, I mean, they're the most well-financed and resourced. Everything else is, not as, is way lower down on this sort of thing. Islamic schools are sort of, I'm sitting at Islamia, the first Islamic school in the country that was state funded at the moment, because there's an event here tonight. But other than that, there isn't the spectrum. So I am working in the refugee sector. Name me one Muslim-led refugee organization. None. Name me civil rights organizations. Name me advocacy organizations. Name me number of, you might find, a cage, or you might find one or two on that side of things, but it is very, very, very rudimentary. As our civil rights are eroding, are being challenged, our faith and framework and all the rest of it is being challenged, we will find that the response to the challenges of the day, okay, response to the challenges and the rise of populism. I'm just supporting the brothers and sisters in the establishment of, providing some crisis comms support to the mosque in the Lake District, okay, which is a new masjid and new project and all the rest of it. And they've had a whole lot of right-wing hate media across it, GB News and this and that and the other and all the rest of it. Now, where's the institutions to provide mosque organizations and institutions that provide the support to help our institutions become stronger, well-governed, well-established, well-resourced, understanding communicate, under all the plethora of stuff? It doesn't exist. So what is really key and critical is that the evolution of the Muslim civil society organizations happens, and that if you look over the last 10 years, what has increased in Muslim civil society? And my anecdotal evidence, but I'm sure that it's going to be backed up by evidence, is an increase of international development organizations. If we did the last decade and a half, we'd have more emergence of more relief organizations. Now, we've got to ask ourselves an honest question. Is that the need of the day? To have, and if we look at the next decade, do we need another 20, 30, 40, 50 international development organizations? Or do we really need supporting the local efforts in supporting the institutions that are built, supporting the youth sector, and I'll stop here for a second, but we're just finishing a piece of work with Goldsmiths University called the Muslim Youth Futures. That's an 18-month exercise about young people and aspirations and their hopes and what they expect from the Muslim civil society and institutions. And that report will be launched after summer. It's with Goldsmiths University, and it's a project that we led on that will sort of has focus groups, understanding of young people. And then I mean, the top line on that is, what does youth provision look like within the Muslim civil society landscape? Name me national, local, regional youth organizations which are well funded. Okay, let's put that aside. Name me what is youth worker, youth coordinator, youth project managers, paid roles to deal with young people and their anxieties and their challenges and their hopes and their aspirations and all the rest of it, growing up in deprived communities or institutions. Yes, bricks and mortar is a part of Muslim civil society, but human resource investment to deal with these infrastructure, to deal with these rising challenges within our civil society is very rudimentary, non-existent at all. And these are hard evidence facts. These are not just anecdotal evidence. And that, I mean, we'll present all of that at the Muslim Youth Futures report, but the evolution of British Muslim civil society is so far behind from the needs of the day to be able to build. And so that's the conclusion of my sort of take over what's happened as our population size has increased, as our complexities have increased, our challenges have increased, our needs have increased, our wealth has increased. So that, money, people say, oh, Jehangir, we've got a fundraising issue. I don't have a fundraising issue. There's plenty of money in, mashallah, Muslim community. We're the most generous. Over 500 million was donated by this 3.8 million community. Over 500 million, it's closer to 750,000. Some say it goes up to 1 billion just by contribution. So the money is not the issue. The issue, in my opinion, is the lack of prioritization of need to resource. And I'm happy to be challenged on any of this, if any of this is making you think, or if you agree or you disagree. I mean, I'd love to have some sort of pushback on any of this, or your own thoughts on any of that. So, I'll shut up there for a second and maybe have some feedback on what I've just stated.
Okay, inshallah, yeah. I think that was a really good painting of a broad picture of what it looks like within Muslim civil society. Very, very important commentaries you made as well. If anyone has any comments on it or questions to do with that, where do we go from here, or anything on this topic at all, but based on what you've just said, brother Jehangir, say, inshallah, please do raise your hand, and then inshallah we'll bring you into the conversation. You can type in the chat as well, but then I'll just have to wait and read it out. But I think you're right. I think I heard that in the past, like they say, some people still refer to it as the Muslim charity sector. I think I heard that it's behind the conventional sector by some years, maybe about a decade. Someone had an estimate of.
To be honest with you, this isn't going to make me popular, but when you say behind, financially, it's strong, and that is akin to the fact that, mashallah, Muslim community is very generous. Okay, 30 years of work, the generosity it's uncomparable. Okay, compared to income to generation, wealth to generosity ratio. Okay, if Muslim community is some of the poorest in the country, okay, with lowest socioeconomic indicators on many levels, then on what logical basis is it the most generous? Naturally, one's logical mind would say, if you're poor, then you've got less to give, and if you've got less to give, then why are you being generous? Well, then that comes into deep faith practice of, it's part of linked to our akhirah, it's part of linked to solidarity with the ummah, it's linked to international crisis, it's linked to our salvation, it's linked to so many aspects of our DNA at this moment in time. But in terms of hierarchy of needs, from a community perspective, hierarchy of needs, that's a mismatch. That's a mismatch itself, and that's a community that is underinvested in institutional terms. And institutional means, human resource capacity, development, continuity, succession planning, financial resilience, good governance, the appointment of skills to resources. Like, okay, so you start a project. Normally what happens is that person knows what X, Y, mates, then we all start a project, right? Based on a network of friends. Now, a network of friends is a good starting point because there's commonality and common cause and all the rest of it. But 30 years later, you can't have an institution just based on a network of friends, right? You've got to say, okay, there's intergenerational input. Like, let's say, okay, 50% of our population of 3.85 million in the United Kingdom is under the age of 25, right? How many seats around boards, policymaking, decision-making in the Muslim civil society institutions do those 25-year-olds and under 25-year-olds occupy? There's no seats. Okay? So that means that young people's voice is not a part of the architecture of design, policy thinking. So if young people were part of Masajid infrastructure, they might design it differently, correct?
Absolutely.
If you don't have a seat at the table, or you don't have a voice, or you don't have any, you often heard I've heard this slogan for 30 years. Our young people are the future. I mean, for God's sake, when's that future going to come into present? I've been with this. I've heard it, I've grown up with this slogan, and and it's always just the age range seems to be moving on. So the point I'm illustrating here is good governance. It's inclusive, it's diverse skill set, it's diverse ages, diverse understanding, and it has fixed terms, it has good frameworks, and it has people moving on. Here we have the Muslim civil society institutions. Basically, if you're on a decision, why is it important? Well, if you're on a decision-making board, then there's no fixed terms. And if you look at the governance, good governance, in any setup, right? My wife was the mayor of Solihull. It's a one-year post. It was an amazing time period, but she knew very well, or we knew very well, you're coming into it, you've got a year, you're into this person, then you move on. You take the chains off, and then you hand it to the next person. And it continues and it continues and it continues. It's an institutionalized. It's not based on the personality. It's based on a system and a process and a system. And that system is more important or as important as the individuals that occupy the seat for that process, correct? But if you don't have a system and you say, yeah, it's personality based, well, then it's born and dies with that those personalities, and that's a real problematic, because basically it closes the door on inclusivity, it closes the door on women, it closes the door on young people, it closes the door on so many levels. Okay, and that is an exclusivity that is fundamentally harmful for the longevity of Muslim civil, if not longevity, for the vibrancy of Muslim civil society organizations. Okay, but that is a challenge. Thank you. Sister is been so kind and bringing me in. Thank you very much, sister. Sister's been so kind. I'm sitting here, and the event's happening on the side, and brought me a drink. So this is part. So when we talk about Muslim civil society, it really financially, mashallah, and Nia and Ikhlas and all the rest of it. But evolution in terms of what civil society looks like outside of my context is the thing is, Afnan, I'm very blessed, alhamdulillah, way more than I deserve. And the reality is that I'm very fortunate in the sense that I operate in both worlds. Muslim civil society world, and I can see, mashallah, institutions trying, individuals trying. There is good concerted effort, but I feel that it's quite limited. The bar is quite low. So you need to raise the bar of what good practice looks like, and then you move accordingly. Whereas in wider civil society, I'm not saying it's perfect. Okay, I'm not saying it's perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but there's a lot to learn, there's a lot to benefit, and there's a lot to cross-share and, understand the dynamics of each other in that respect. And the really positive thing, Afnan, is, mashallah, now in 2025, 24, 23, 22, and 21, there's quite a few Muslim-led, Muslim civil society leaders in the wider sector. Heading up Oxfam, Halima Begum, Malik, Save the Children, number of, in a number of civil society institutions funding a lot of it. Now, I'm not saying that, but I am saying is that the wider sector is recognizing the value of all of this. And so what I'm urging us to think about is, when we support, we ask some questions about what does our governance and what does our organizational framework look like within our Muslim civil society, and not a demand, but ask that we ask to do better, so that we can have institutions that are fit for purpose on this particular time, and moving across, in which that they are that they play a valuable role of social impact. And I've seen some wonderful institutions in Manchester, in Birmingham, in Nottingham, in a number of the cities across. They are not struggling, but they are, alhamdulillah, some of them have been, well recognized by the industry standards, as it were, and all the rest of it.
Okay, well, subhanAllah, that's quite a detailed analysis. You brought up something about succession and, when is the future coming? Because that slogan's been thrown around quite a lot for a long time. So I thought of something when you were saying that. And it was, how can you succession plan when you don't know who the successor is, or there's no space for successors to kind of come in and be mentored, directly and such, to be trained up to do the same thing, but within the new context that they'll find themselves. So
yeah, look, there's a wonderful. Just messaged me when I took on this new role. Now, there's a wonderful. I was very fortunate to work with one of the best leaders in the sector, in the third sector, in the civil society sector. Name's Mike Adamson. He was the chief executive of British Red Cross, and I was working directly with him under his supervision for 1 year. And during the COVID time period, when things were falling apart and things were really tested and challenged, and British Red Cross is, I think, about a £380 million organization, which has a very large. It's known as the fourth emergency. Well, it's got the mandate of sits right under government across the sector. And so it's got a very big mandate in the organization. Anyway, and when we worked together in COVID for a year as a program director for COVID response in the voluntary sector, he instilled inside of us, the leadership team at the time, something called generous leadership. Okay, and I valued that philosophy and understanding, and that is about ensuring that the mission and the mandate of the organization is at the core of it, and that generosity that leadership is generous in nature, which provides an enabling environment for more people to come through the system. Now, this is not going to make me popular, but we have an environment which has closing the drawbridge and just leaving it enough open for yourself to go in and out of. Okay, look at any institution across all the environment, the ecosystem, whatever. Now, you might say, Jehangir, it's a very negative sort of framing, but the facts speak for themselves, my brothers and sisters. I'm not going to sugarcoat it in that respect. There's a long way for us to go. Heart's in the right place. We've got to demand better. We've got to do better. Why? Because what's at stake? There's rising populism. It's, I don't know if you read the newspaper today or the article today, that if there was a general election today, right, Reform would overwhelmingly win. Okay, that's politically difficult for the inclusivity of the country. I mean, that's going to potentially move the country right wing and target these guys in Lake District. They just want to build a mosque and a center for their, for their congregation constituency. They're being targeted left, right, and center. GB News is all over them. we are living in hostile times. Cast your mind a year ago, just over a year ago, when the riots kicked off, who was on the receiving end of that? Muslims, minorities, refugees, this, that, and the other, when they had nothing to do with Southport. That's what the climate is looking like, and our inability to engage with wider civil society, of being people of khair, of benefit, of community, of social value, of support. There's some, again, come back to it. There's some wonderful initiatives up and down the country. There's some wonderful initiatives, not denying that. There's wonderful initiatives that have khair in the heart of it. Dr. Hani used to teach us in the early 90s, and when we were in the circles and all the teaching, the best of you is, he used to teach us the hadith, the best of you are those who are most beneficial to others, right? So you want to be, so if that's the core mantra of why we as individuals exist, then we as organizations, our civil society organizations, core mantra should be that as well. And that's what it should be embodied. It's service of others. Service to him, and those others is our community, and alhamdulillah, it was beautifully displayed and recognized during COVID. You know why? Our masajids were closed, our institutions were closed, so that forced us to look outside the congregation. So when we're forced, as in, oh, no constituency to serve here, no congregation, then we started looking out, and virtually every other masjid or every other institution said, who are the needy, who are the most vulnerable, who are the elderly, let's take the medicine to them. And we have it inside of us, voluntarily and otherwise, to be a people of khair. Because why? It's linked to our akhirah, correct? It's a selfish thing. I want to do goodness because I want salvation, mercy, blessings, and akhir. So you can say it's a selfish motive. Like, and it's inbuilt in our system of khidmah. And then the institutions should sort of be structured in a way that's at the heart of what we do. And then, honestly, I'm hand on heart believe that we'll be able to tackle Islamophobia way better that way, or hostility towards us that way, when people are, when policy and media and political narrative turns against us, and you respond to it by prophetic narrative of love and khair and goodness, it doesn't add up, does it? It doesn't add up. And so therefore you counter it in that manner. So if our institutions are built in a way that can be of service oriented to wider society, then alhamdulillah, we're not only fulfilling a prophetic mandate, but we're really, responding to the need of the day. So this is why I think Muslim civil society needs a real upgrade, really needs, next generation to really unpack it even much more intellectually, philosophically, spiritually, go deeper than where, alhamdulillah, over the last 4 or 5 decades, we've taken it, and in order to pass it on, it needs greater depth, inshallah, and greater depth internally and externally as well, to be taking on those the leadership challenges of building a civil society, building a society that helps add value to wider society.
Right. So then in light of that, then, in terms of adding value, in terms of the next generation, the people who are going to take it forward, many people here might be involved in activism voluntarily, or they might want to take up a role like that, or might have done one like myself. So then in light of that, what advice would you give to your younger self, having seen that context and knowing that change is necessary, knowing that you might be able to bring it about, but what steps would you take if you were younger now? What advice would you give to yourself in that position, knowing that what you know now?
I think, just reading this, I think, mashallah, I've seen some institutions. I'll give you a few names. Look up Himma organization in Nottingham. Okay, look up the Muadz Trust in Birmingham. Look up, the food bank one in London, and social welfare organizations as well. Now, look, I love what NZF have done as an example, right? The vast majority of our zakat is being sent abroad, correct? Right. Prophetically, that's at odds. That's at odds with the prophetic tradition. Number one, theologically, right? Number two is that our hearts are generous enough to be able to ensure that we don't neglect one over the other. Okay? But if we were as a community to land today, we would know that the prioritization is building our localized institutions. This is what our parents' generation did, or our grandparents' generation did in the 60s. They built the mosques, they built the core bases, and they killed the institutions. So I think there just needs to be a recalibration of international solidarity versus localized effort. Okay? And the localized effort is you using your charm, your goodwill, your relationships to kind of force a seat around the table, whatever table that may be. And then I come to one conclusion to what I say to my younger self. I'll give that a go, and let's say I'll give that a time frame. In my local institution, I'll say, you know what, brothers, uncles, aunties, look, please don't treat us like, bache, right? We have something to contribute. We're this age. You talk to us about Tariq bin Ziyad's and the Muhammad bin Qasim's and the Muhammad al-Fatih's and all the young people and this, that, and the other, but you don't give us a seat on the table. Correct? In some language, that's called hypocrisy, right? You talk about it, but you don't practice it. So give us a seat at the table, and we'll work together with multi-generational institution, and we all sort of respect the wisdom and sacrifice of the founding fathers, but we need a seat at the table because then we can all work at it together, right? If you don't get that seat, then I have to say, build your own table.
Yeah, your own seat, your own table.
Own seat or your own table. That's a simple. Don't sit on the bloody sidelines whinging and whining. Because that is, I can't stand on whinging, whining, sidelines. This isn't right. That isn't right. Now you've got to make it. You've got to have. You've got to make the price is too high to pay for apathy. The price will be too high to pay, saying that person's not letting me in. That person's this and that and the other. You try your best. You work at it. You demonstrate. You win people over. You do khair. You do whatever it's required. But you're a part of. You try to build part of that local place-based model, wherever you're living, wherever you're based, to be a part of that. And if you can't, for whatever reason, people are not letting you in, then you've got to start an initiative or a project or an activity that creates your own table. Okay, because if you don't, one is a wasted talent, a skill set that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given to you that's wasted, that the ummah or the community hasn't benefited. That is a travesty, in my opinion. Number two is that you'll just get very, very bitter and frustrated about everything that's wrong around you. So you've got to, and in, God bless him again, in harakat is barakat. In action there is barakah. So you do something, Allah will put barakah in that action and something positive will happen. But it needs thought. It can't just like, okay, let's, the most amazing initiatives have started out with just fulfilling a basic need. There is COVID, people giving food, that led to a permanent food bank, that led to a food pantry. People are buying. It evolves into different. You get learning from it. You then evolve. Your project, your meeting a need becomes a project, which becomes an idea, which then you find support for it. It becomes a small organization, a campaign, a project, and then organization, and you build it and build it and build it. And then you be a part of something in that nature. The challenge has been that too much sidelining and, not sitting on the sidelines, but not being proactive enough. I mean, I hope you don't mind, but maybe it's because social media is an easy outlet. You can sit there and write stuff and feel that we've done something, but it's a bit of a cop out in my book. All this stuff requires hard work and sacrifice and blood and sweats and everything else in that respect. So I think there's plenty of space in civil society for lots of work to be done. And like I said, we can go into greater detail on some of this at some other point in which that we're talking about. But mashallah, some good initiatives up and down the country that are sort of taking place. And I work with community-based organizations and initiatives to try and support and help those. But there's some amazing stuff that's been happening in different settings.
Yeah, inshallah, it'd be great to get a list from you afterwards. Maybe if we put together a group chat for this, as we have done for some of the other mentoring things, I can maybe post it in there for the audience, and they could see some of the initiatives that you've just recommended there that are local things to get involved in. And so build your own seat and or your own table if you have to, or join the current one and just insist towards it. But come up with a new initiative, basically, right? That's really.
I am saying this to the elders, so don't get me. I do walk into leadership boardrooms and discussions, and the uncles and the elders and all the rest of it. I do say this to them, but
it takes time for it to sink in. I was fundraising with NZF for a year. The local message took ages to sink in. It was really difficult. Some understood and some just didn't. It was always that way. I noticed that.
I think we haven't taught this through generationally. We've taught this what's at present, what's this week, what's this month, what's next year. And now this is my space and I'm the owner of this space, and I'm not going to let anybody else in because then I might lose something. The question is, again, coming back to the words of my fantastic mentor at British Red Cross, what are we losing and what are we gaining? Right? Shared leadership means that if I'm a good leader, then I would have had an army of people that I've invested time, money, resource in that should be better than me, or when one steps aside or one moves, then it's a continuum business continuity process, right? The business or the business or the organization doesn't just fold or doesn't just stagnate as a result of that. So the continuity of it is really, really key. And for that to happen, you've got to make space. All the boards, not all, virtually all the look. I've had in my somewhat embarrassing introduction, I've sat on various boards. They say to me, Jang, you're a board member of Runnymede Trust, you're a board member of this, you're a board member of this. It's a 3-year fixed term. You can, if the board decide, you can have it another 3 years, and then that's it. It's not mine. It's an entrusted position that I've been given as a board position for 3 years, for 6 years, and I'm done. Because that's the nature of the term. It's a fixed term. The concept of fixed term doesn't exist, which then what does it do? It makes it stale. It does, and it closes the door on entry into innovation, ideas, people, different time sets, and all the rest of it. Okay, and that's to do with the fact that, I'm sorry, people are just holding on for dear life until they pass away, which is a harm to the longevity of the institutions that we need to build.
Yeah, absolutely. So Jazakallah khair for that contribution. It's very honest and really refreshing, and it's good to hear, from inside the industry, inside the sector. That's what it's like, and kind of the initiatives to change that. I think you have answered it, but I'm wondering if there's any more left. Rima was asking if you could basically we'll go into a little bit of Q&A now. I think. Inshallah, just to make sure we get the most out of the time we have with you. So the question before was, could you give us examples of new initiatives that you'd like to see expand and develop that we could get involved in? Obviously, you've given the small examples, you've given grassroots, but is there any other sort of new initiatives that have?
Yeah. I'd like to see Muslim youth sector organizations. Look, I'd like to see youth employment initiatives. I'd like to see more work done in the refugee migrant sector. I'd like to see more work done in the protection of civil liberties. I'd like to see more work done in the challenging of illegality frameworks. People get, and I must commend our brothers and sisters across the pond in the United States, from CARE, Council of American Islamic Relations, to MPAC, Muslim Public Affairs Council. I mean, there are a plethora of Muslim-led civil society organizations, okay, in the United States. So I know it's a different ball game. It's, I've lived there and it's a different ball game, but there is a spectrum of plethora of Muslim-led civil society organizations across, even legal funds and huge amount, right, needed to build all of this stuff. So, we need to have financial instruments that help the projects support, initiate, develop. So if we could envisage from 10 years from now that we had a £100 million community pot, that you have a brilliant idea, an initiative, and a Dragon's Den situation that you then apply your funding to. And I'm just going to give a very personal sort of example. There's an organization in Birmingham called United by 22. It was the legacy fund from Commonwealth Legacy, and I think they had about £10 million. And part of their project, one of their initiatives was Ideas Made Real. And my daughter made a pitch for a project in which had mental health and cooking together to help young people cope with difficulty and challenges. And she made that pitch. She went to the room. There was about 100 organizations there. She went herself, made the pitch. They loved the project, and they awarded her just under 10 grand to help that project realize. Okay. And then they helped her, supported her. It was based on Mohan Trust. This is giving you one example. It's called, the project was called Nourishing Souls. They loved the project so much that they repeated the funding for the project. And it's helping young people suffering mental health through the use of cooking and coming together in that respect of their culinary arts and playing a supportive role on that side. To the extent that this year they've asked her to be on the panel that awards this money to other groups. Okay. Now, this goes back to the core point. Number one, brothers and sisters, there's a lot out there. There's a huge amount out there, right? But you've got to open yourself up to that world. Secondly, you've got to put yourself forward. When you put yourself forward, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala opens the doors. And third, success or failure doesn't matter. It's all a learning. You learn from it, you evolve, and you move forward onto that side of things. On the flip side, like I said, you can sit and just, again, think, I'm not good enough, I don't have the idea, nobody wants to help me, nobody wants to, and all the rest of it. And then that keeps your talent or your ideas held back. And that's a challenge. And so, mashallah, like I said, a number of initiatives. And the funding environment is that's something that I've learned over the last 4 or 5 years that is very conducive to supporting the strengthening of especially minority-led projects and initiatives that help deal with inequality, structural inequality, racism, Islamophobia, you name it. All of these things, subhanAllah, in the civil society space, it's very, very, very good. It's just that we don't have the institutions to understand the potential of accessing some of that resource that might be available for us.
Inshallah. I mean, it's very promising. It's always promising. You're right. You should not take it to heart too much and let your ideas flourish and be out there. I think you're right. Once you hear enough criticism from others within or from different higher positions, you can tend to your ideas kind of close off. You feel a little bit like you can't really defend them or push them forward. And I saw a little bit of that in some places, even though it's kind of the best to adapt, to the times and take on ideas. It was very different to how it could be. Yeah. Just wanted to. There's a comment as well from Brother Ahmad. He was saying about it was to do with you're saying about leadership circles and such. You were saying that they basically that they leave it too late to pass the baton on. So
yeah. It's right. It's correct. They leave it too late to pass the baton on. Yeah. If we, here's if any of you academics or anybody who has that sort of research-oriented mind, do a piece of research on Muslim civil society organizations and tell me what the average age of board positions are. Okay. I say, why is that important? Why do I keep going on about board positions? Well, just hold a lot of power, right? You hold the budget, the finances, the treasury, you decide who is going to be the chief executive, whatever it is, and all the rest of it. So those are important. So if you look at that, and there isn't a mix in that aspect. And so people leave it too late. And so by that time, you've lost the opportunity of a generation to get involved and engaged. But where it's involved, when you look out for the report, when we launch it, Muslim Future, where you've seen good practice of young people, of inclusive and diverse into the board, into the organizational framework, you will see some really good, good results and good and really positive outcomes.
Inshallah, definitely. Guys, this is the Q&A section. So inshallah, if you have something you want to ask at this point about maybe working in the sector or volunteering in the sector alongside your career, I think some jobs even allow for like a voluntary hour or so in slot within there, so you can still do it in that context as well. If there's anything, please do ask now, because this is really, really, really good. These are gems, honestly, to get from someone in the sector. Actually, and while we're waiting for that, actually, I wanted to share something that we already chatted about it, we already messaged about it. I remember when I first met you, that stuck with me to now. About you were giving me advice on fundraising, because that's the role I took right at NZF, and coordinating that. And you told me that it's about relating to people, like emotionally, and also it's about storytelling. Right, and that was two of the key takeaways I've taken away to now. That's the kind of impact you have on people. That's when I found it worked best, was when I was able to employ that properly. And when it worked where I had some things to work on, I found that it was when I wasn't able to employ that kind of principle. So I just wanted to share that with everyone, because that was honestly some wisdom.
That comes from my Ustad teacher, Mr. Dr. Hani Al-Banna, and again, which links to what we were saying earlier. Dr. Hani took the approach where he was not afraid to take the risk of bringing on young people, okay? To get slightly, hopefully, no Man United haters out here, right? But the reality was that the great Alex Ferguson, they said the criticism levied at him was that he won't win anything with the kids, right? And and that was the best potential United generation as football generation as well. And they were all, and they young and all the rest of it, right? Their zeal, their desire, their ability and all the rest of it, investing and taking the risk and, giving a space to young people is really, really key and critical. Really key and critical, because mashallah, the desire to serve and to make a difference will be there. And I urge every institution to earmark spots and spaces and places to have a more inclusive community organization that reflects our communities, and meets the service need. For example, 1.65 to 3.85, refugees, they're not all South Asians. It's not South Asian anymore, okay? We are not, these 3.85 million Muslims are no longer Pakistani, Bengali, Indian, and, Arab. This is a diverse reflection of the Ummah that's come from all over the world. But if you look around you and you only see South Asian, then it's already non-inclusive, is it? It's already, and then that gives rise to Bengalis by themselves, and Somalis by themselves, and Arabs by themselves, and Kurds by themselves, and this by them. Then everybody creates their own section. Then it increases and perpetuates the sectarianism. So everybody should have an open platform, an open process. It doesn't matter who started the project, but everybody opens it up, and then we have generous leadership, that allows people from all different backgrounds. And then again, we go back to the prophetic example from Persia to Habasha to Yemen to all these different sort of things. It was so diverse. The people around the Prophet ﷺ were not just Makkan and Quraysh. It was people from all backgrounds, which were very different to the ones that were in that space. So then we look around ourselves in institutions and we only see South Asian people, then, you know, don't be surprised when we say, you know what, I'm going to build my own thing because, you know, that's how it is. And, you know, and that's the nature of it. So,
example I thought of just then was Salman al-Farsi, right?
Yeah.
You know, the Battle of the Trench, and you know, they took his initiative. They let him on it. They didn't just shut it down, right? They brought him down. That
it was alien, right, Afnan? It was alien to that time.
Yeah.
But it was something that won the battle, right? So you bring new ideas, new ways, cultural diversity, mixture, and all that beauty. Okay, and you lose it if you say this is my club and my clique and my cultural attachment to people who are like me, my tribe. That link that keeps everybody else. That creates a unhealthy, fairly stale, non-pluralistic, non-innovative, monolithic institution. I think I badgered that point enough now, my brother.
Yeah, yes, I think so. I think it's fair to people, alhamdulillah. But it's probably a good call today, but it's good to hear someone say it, you know. You when you're active in the space, you don't feel like you can necessarily say it and sort of speak truth to them because you're working under them as well, you know. You're getting paid there at the end of the day as well. So it kind of feels kind of difficult to say things until you're more experienced or you're in a board level role or something like that where you can actually put that voice to use.
So exactly.
Yeah. So yeah, I wanted to ask, this is a personal question of mine, but I think it will benefit others. Before working in the space, I had never taken pay for you know, fundraising or like anything like Muslim work related before. It was always voluntary. I always felt that like I had to sort of renew my intentions all the time. I felt like I struggled a little, like can I still stay honest, you know, to the wanting to help people and take pay from it? Obviously, ironically, it's fine. Like the zakat collector is one of the categories. Those who used to administer zakat in Medina, the Prophet would pay them to take it full time because everyone's zakat day was, you know, every day of the year. They had to do it full time, and so I had no qualms from that way. But just from within the heart, like how do you find that you balance that? You still have targets like anywhere else. Sometimes 6-figure targets, like, you know, you can be given, and it's like, you know, how do you balance that? Where it's like you can definitely take pay for it, but you keep your intentions pure as well, and you know, try and use the politics to the advantage rather than to use it to take.
Look, Afnan, it's a really good question. Really, really, really good question. Sincerity, ikhlas, a very simple formula that we used to have. Sincerity plus amal equals barakah. Okay. And the starting of that formula has to be sincerity. Okay. Now, sincerity is a very personal thing between you and God, and nobody else can really measure that. And ikhlas isn't designed to be measured by others, but measured by your relationship with God. Okay. In this work of Islamic work or Muslim civil society work or anything with Islam, Muslims representative in shape or form, whether you like it or not, we're being judged by others as in one shape or form. And really a very, 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 I mean, again, you might say I'm a bit old school or whatever, whichever way you want to look at it, but goodness gracious me, you know, our teachers drummed that in really hard, right? Ikhlas. And when we used to have a great success in achievement of a target, you might call it, right? You know, at Royal Albert Hall or this or that event or this, that, and the other. Goodness me, every time I spoke to Dr. Hani or our teachers or our superiors, as it were, about a success, immediately his instruction was to make sujood.
Make sujood.
So I was sujood, okay, make sajda. I was driving on the motorway once, And Dr. Hani, he was on the phone and and I told him something great that had happened. He made me pull over there and then. I was like, look, doc, can't do that. It's dangerous. No, you do it. He was on the other end of the phone. He would institutionalize humility in times of success. Institutionalize. Now, that's not easy to do. And that's a very personal thing, but that's a cultural, not cultural, but that's a leadership model that was really, I don't say really expected or inculcated, let's say, in the philosophy of the leaders of the organizations that we worked in. And so, you know, humility, ikhlas, subhanAllah, in this line of work, akhi, in this line of work, if you want humility, get yourself out of the boardroom and get yourself on the front line and you watch what happens.
Yeah, see the people in person. I still have contact. Yeah.
Boardrooms, right? But my God, my most favorite time in the last 30 years has been on front line. My least favorite is the boardroom.
Yeah.
Politics, and the front line is human contact.